And there's days where I don't feel like cleaning. I don't feel like getting out of bed. I physically can't. And so having them understand and the support there versus brushing it off like, oh, it's been 6 months, you should be fine.
Welcome to the Midweek Motivation Podcast, where we bring practical help for your faith and life. Here's today's episode. Welcome back to the Midweek Motivation episode of the Westside podcast. My name is Gabe Kolstad, and I'm joined by Stephanie Tripp and Lorin Bumbarger, and we are talking about a pretty deep topic here. It's the topic of grief and loss. And so we're going to jump right into it, coming out of a series called Hope and Future. And as we're getting ready at Westside for something called Dragons and Dandelions, we're going to be talking about mental health, emotional health, and how to, fight and win the big and small battles in your life. And we just thought it'd be such a good week to do a deep dive on this topic of grief and loss that so many people have dealt with. And I want to say thanks to you guys for jumping in and joining us.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to begin with a question that is pretty basic, but as we were getting ready for this, I actually wondered about it. And it kind of felt silly because I felt like, as a person who's helped a lot of others and been through some stuff myself, I should probably know the answer to this. But here's the question. What even is grief? What do you guys think it is?
I think for me, grief is after losing a loved one or something that was very important to you. I think it's the process that you go through, the different emotions and feelings, and there's a lot of them. And knowing that grief it's never gone. I mean, it's always going to be a part of your life. It's just going to come in different waves is what I've experienced.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Lorin, what do you think it is?
I'll dovetail on that. It's
okay.
Endless sadness and sorrow.
Wow.
And you just continue to feel the sorrow. And it is a journey or a process that you go through to come out the other end.
That's tough. You used the word endless. Yeah. Because maybe the expectation would be it's just going to go away at some point.
Oftentimes you hear that from people.
Okay. Yeah.
They actually do say that.
Yeah, like, aren't you over it yet?
Or you should get over it.
Wow. Yeah. That must be hurtful for you when you're in a super deep grief and somebody says something like that.
That's very painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I love the idea. I was just sharing with you guys a few minutes ago that in Isaiah, there's this prophecy of the Messiah, Jesus, and it's hundreds of years before the birth of Christ. We're getting ready for the resurrection of Jesus this weekend in terms of celebrating that Easter. Great, amazing thing that Jesus is alive. But hundreds of years before he even came, there's this prophecy about what the Messiah would be like. And it says in Isaiah 53, it says, he was a man of sorrows, acquainted with the deepest grief. And I don't know how it makes you feel, but when I think about the fact that God understands loss and grief, it makes me feel understood.
Yes.
It makes me feel known. And I would imagine for both of you who have stories of deep loss, that's true too.
It's very reassuring.
Yeah, good.
It brings me a lot of comfort knowing that he experienced that and I can turn to him in those times. Yeah.
Well, let's get into your stories a little bit, and we just want to kind of unpack it. So what we want to know is, what then, you mentioned a little bit, but what causes grief in general, and what's been your experience with grief in specific?
I think for me, the idea of grief and what causes it can be several different things, whether it's a loss of a job or a divorce. I think those are types of grief. I think the main focus today we're discussing is grief and loss of a loved one. And in my case, I lost my mom unexpectedly in October of last year. Mm-hmm. And only a few months before that, I had the opportunity of sharing with you part of her journey and how she was getting sober and making some really healthy life changes. And one day we thought everything was, she was okay and everything was fine. And then the next morning she was gone just like that. And so that was a very big, a big loss. And I never had felt grief before that. This was my first experience with grief, I feel like, because I had lost my grandmother and I lost my stepdad, but those were more expected. Like we knew they were going to be passing versus my mom suddenly gone.
I suppose part of this is however closely connected you were with a person determines a little bit about how much the size of the grief, maybe the amount of the grief you're experiencing. And I know your mom was so important to you. And then of course, like you said, there was that real exciting time in life where you're watching her really get better and grow and thinking about her future. I'm sure that was just such a horrible shock.
It was very tragic. And I just finally felt like we were learning, learning about each other for the first time. And growing up, I didn't have that relationship with her. And so finally being able to build that was really exciting. And for it to all be ripped away so quickly was devastating.
Yeah. Wow. I remember one of the stories that we discovered through your journey about your mom was that she was excited about her own growth.
Yes.
And I remember there was a text, right, that she was in the middle of sending to her boyfriend, I think, about how she was proud of herself.
Yes.
She had made a major milestone.
Yep. Was hitting 6 months sober the day after she passed, and she was sending him, I'm feeling so proud of myself, and didn't even get to hit the send button before she passed. So I am thankful she passed very quickly, but it just breaks my heart that she finally was out of that hole she had been in for so many years. Yeah. And then was taken. But also I'm glad she was taken when she was feeling that way too.
Yeah. I remember being at the service and the feeling of gratitude for that she felt that win. Yeah. She really felt that. She did. Which was cool. Yeah.
That was special, yeah.
I'm really sorry about your mom.
Thank you, Lorin.
It's a good story.
Thank you.
Sometimes there aren't enough words to say, and lots of times people don't know what to say.
Yep.
But if they try, we have to appreciate it, right?
Yep. Or if they're just there, that is just enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lorin, you want to share a little bit about your story?
My story goes way back. How far back do you want me to go?
When were you born? No.
Well, no, I was about 14 when my first best friend passed away when we were in high school.
Wow.
He died of kidney failure. And then another good friend of mine was actually killed at Sand Lake in the early 2000s. I've lost both my parents, a sister to cancer. And then more recently, I lost my son in 2017 of colon cancer. And then right around 3 years later, we lost our daughter, Lindsay. She had cancer also. And that she had gone through the same treatment Josh did. And Josh didn't do real well with it because he was stage 4 when he was diagnosed. Lindsay was stage 2, but it came back. And when it comes back, it really comes back with a vengeance. And so she passed away in June of 2020.
Goodness, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's tough.
Yeah.
Because I liken it to like you get a very bad injury to your arm, let's say, like a bad cut. Okay, and that's in a way that's what grief is. It's like an injury. It's painful.
That's a good description.
And as you go through life, you begin to heal, and sometimes you bump it. Yeah, and it causes more damage, and sometimes it starts to heal up. And for me, I was just getting healed up. I had done Grief Share 2 different times, and I had a pastoral counselor that I saw once a week. And if without that, I would have not made it. It was just, that's what helped me get there. And then when Lindsay got sick, it was just like reliving that all over again.
I'll bet.
So it was just like opening the wound again.
Yeah.
That's a great description.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Grief Share, which is a wonderful organization. And we'll talk more about Grief Share. And if people out there that are listening or watching are looking for some help, we get some great news, I think, on that.
Yeah,
sure.
But talk a little bit about you've both been through incredible loss. Where and how did you start to experience a little bit of healing in your journey?
Well, for me, being so recent with the grief, I had already been attending our Celebrate Recovery program.
Okay.
And been a part of that for some years now. And so just continuing to show up on the days where I feel like I can make it there, and that I'm going to be a positive addition versus if I'm having a bad attitude, I'm most likely going to stay home because I know how much my energy rubs off on others. So it's important to me that those people get the healing they need that night rather than try to take care of me. So I still reach out to my support group. That's been helpful. So my sponsor, some really close friends within the program. I do have a friend who has led Grief Share, Priscilla. And so being in contact with her, and Jessica Bishop has been a big help to me, also one of our pastors here. And just being able to have bad days and to be honest when people are, how are you doing, has taken a big weight off, because I used to come Sundays and I'd be like, everything's great. This is the best day ever. And now when people ask me, I can be honest, and I get that love and that support, and I don't feel bad about being honest.
Yeah.
Because our community is so welcoming and loving. And so that's been a big help, is reaching out when I need it.
Yeah.
And also staying in contact with my sister. She's been suffering a lot of guilt through this. And so being a support for her, but also having her support me has been helpful. And then just being honest at home with the family too, because I have been in and out of the depression through this and my anxiety. And there's days where I don't feel like cleaning. I don't feel like getting out of bed. I physically can't. And so having them understand and the support there versus brushing it off like, oh, it's been 6 months, you should be fine. When in reality, no, it does reopen. And just a song on the radio or seeing a sunrise some mornings, I just am in tears because I wish she was here to experience it with me. So I think for me, just reaching out to my support system, getting in the Word, and journaling has been huge.
Okay.
You always share how you journal.
I'm a total nerd about
and
journaling. Yeah.
I love that you do that. And I have tried so many times to get involved in journaling. I never sticks. But this time, it's been several months now, and I always feel so good after I'm journaling and talking to God and asking for his guidance. And it's really, I think that's helped me get to the place I'm at now where I want to help others.
Yeah, that's great. I've learned that journaling is the dishwasher of the mind.
I like that.
So it just kind of, you know what, it just, for me, it's a place, and I don't think everybody has to do it. I don't think it's like that. But for the people that like it, I think it becomes almost, it's just so therapeutic. You're disentangling all your thoughts, and they do, I think, especially if you journal kind of in the presence of the Lord.
Yes.
And I love that idea that David said in the Psalms. He said, in the morning, I'm going to lay my requests before you and wait in wild anticipation. And I just love that. You're like, here's what I'm thinking. So I'm glad. But what I hear you saying is that for you have, well, for one, when the loss happened, you were already connected in community.
Yes.
But what I also hear you saying is it's not automatic that that's going to help, because you still have to reach out.
Yes.
Maybe it was easier because you already had a web, so to speak, of relationships, but it doesn't mean that it still doesn't just happen.
No,
right?
It does not.
You have to reach out.
Yes.
Interesting. And again, we're going to talk more about Grief Share and what it is specifically and how to get involved, but you are just stepping into an opportunity with Grief Share to co-lead a group with Lorin.
Yes, I'm very excited, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it entails as far as for my own healing journey, but be able to bring others alongside and watch them be able to heal also in a community
That's
versus
awesome.
Trying to figure it out on my own.
Yeah. I think another little piece that I heard you say was, so you got sort of some disciplines in your own life. You've got a great support network, but you're learning to have grace with yourself.
Yes.
And maybe you're managing your own expectations of yourself through the process,
Definitely.
which sounds pretty healthy. So that's great.
Yeah.
Well, we're proud of you.
Good.
We're proud of you, Stephanie. Yeah.
And you're sharing already.
Sharing already.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're doing great. That's what it takes.
Yes.
It really does.
How about you, Lorin? You devastating loss upon loss for you.
It's been really hard. You mentioned very early on about the emotions and in that roller coaster, and you feel depression and for me there was a lot of anger, and I was angry at God for the longest time, and sometimes it comes back, but you ask questions. Well, why? I mean, you took one and we lived through that, and then another one. It's like, really? So it gets a lot of questions in your mind about, how did that happen and why did it happen? Those kinds of things. And then you get angry for having him let it happen, even though we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. Then you asked about, what are some things that helped me through it?
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, I had a counselor. That helped a lot. And she was a Christian counselor, so we prayed. I have a wonderful story about something that occurred before my son died. And the fact is that I knew when it was going to happen. I was told.
Wow.
And it's a story. I've been writing it into a book. And so when that happened, and it happened on the exact day that I was told, which was my dad's birthday. So I've pretty much been a Christian all my life, so I've attended different churches. I really enjoy this one, and it's for the support and the people here are warm and friendly, and I really like that. But
we love having you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Some of the verses that really come to mind, when I was told that when he was going to die, and actually on that morning that he did die, I didn't think he was going to die because we were talking. I mean, he had an oxygen mask on, but we were texting. I still have that text. And I just... my counselor sent me this verse at the exact moment that I needed it, and I was falling apart because something had told me when this was going to happen.
I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give, so don't be troubled or afraid.
And,
wow.
And I just love that verse, and it's so powerful. And then if you go back to Jesus talking in the Beatitudes, he said, blessed are those that are mourning, for they will be comforted. And so I focused on those two verses a lot. And basically what it was saying was, I need to bring them to you. And what I like about John's verse is that it tells you what's in the world for peace is only temporary. It's fleeting. It doesn't stay with you. Yeah. And I will say this, honestly, that the only peace that's always there for you is God's peace. But you have to reach out and you have to get a hold of it. You have to get a grip on it. I kind of liken it to being you've slipped into a cold river and you're being swept away, and Jesus is on the bank and he's reaching out for you, and in that is his peace, and you reach up and you can grab him, but you let go. And so that's one of my favorite verses, because if you want some really powerful peace, it comes from the Lord. It doesn't come from alcohol or drugs or sometimes other people. If you really want something to rely on, would be Christ.
Yeah. And
that's kind of what Grief Share is all about, if I can go that direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I took the Grief Share courses, it's 13 weeks long, so it's you have a number of weeks to work on some of these things, and they cover the whole gamut of emotions and things that you go through and things that will help. And it's done by people who have already been there and gone through it. So it really is heartening, and it gives you some peace just reading through it and looking through the materials. It does that, and you have a workbook, so you spend some time in Scripture every day if you do it that way.
Yeah,
and it's just very helpful.
And that obviously made a huge difference for you.
Yeah, my journey, it did.
Yeah. Just
It
being
sure
able
did.
to work through kind of slowly, piece by piece.
It is a slow process. I think our society says, oh, you should be done with that, over it in a season.
Yeah.
And for most of us, it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah. Wow. I'm wondering if you would be willing to share a little bit more detail about losing your son, because, if you knew or you had a real strong feeling about when this was going to happen, do you mind sharing a little more about that story and
I would love to
what
tell
happened?
you it.
Yeah.
It's a great story. Well, we had been in the hospital with him. It was mid-February. It was snowing because he was in Central Oregon. And I was taking care of him in my own home, but he had been so sick, and he had one leg that had swollen up. I mean, it was double the normal size, and it was from his lymph nodes from the radiation.
Okay.
And we saw that, and he had a little bit of a cough, and so I took him to the hospital, which was St. Charles in Bend. And pretty much from the 2nd of February until the 4th week, he was in the hospital.
Okay.
So in the 4th week, we went to hospice. And just right before that, I'm sorry, I'm kind of out of order here. What happened was when it was the last week he was in the hospital, part of it was in the ICU. And he actually did make some great progress, kind of rebounded a little bit, and they put him in a room. And so I was sitting with him, and Patty was not with me. My wife was not with me. She was staying over here in Beaverton, and of course I was over there taking care of him. She had a business to run, so that's why she was here. And so a lot of friends, real friends, came, and one I had met in my church in 1985, and he came over and would stay with me, and we would visit. And of course Josh would sleep most of the time, but so one day we were in the hospital just sitting around the bed and laughing and watching TV and kind of talking, and Josh would fall asleep, and then he'd wake up again, and we'd talk a little bit, and he'd fall back to sleep. And he had known Bob Richards for a really long time. And so we decided it was time to go to dinner, and so we drove to Black Bear. And we went into Black Bear, and we sat down, and everything was pretty much normal. And I sat down facing the whole restaurant and towards the door, and we placed our order, and Bob and I were talking about something, and I don't know what it was, but something passed through me. That's the best way I could say it. Wow. Is something passed through me, not just through my head, but through my whole body. And at that moment, I had knowledge of an image of the future. And it was one of a room, which I hadn't been in yet, and a bed. And I realized that it was my father's birthday. And I just burst out crying with, it's kind of like a pre-grief, what you experience when you know that your child is dying. And so anyway, I just was sobbing, and I looked up and I saw the waitress coming with our meal, because there weren't very many people in here. It was snowing pretty bad. And Bob had looked up at me and really didn't say anything, because I cry pretty easily. And he just kind of looked at me and tilted his head and said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I know when it's going to be." And he goes, How do you know when it's going to be? And I said, "Something just told me." Wow. So we finished our meal, and I calmed down, and we drove back. And we spent the rest of the evening visiting and talking, just like we had been, the days before. So it was time to leave, and we went out, and we got in the car, and I was driving him. So we headed back to Eagle Crest, which is where we were staying. And the road between two parts of Eagle Crest is a BLM road, which is real curvy, going through junipers and sagebrush, and no middle line or anything. And as I was driving along, it hit me again. Whatever that was, it came again in the same manner. And I just started sobbing. And I had a death grip on the steering wheel, and I was sobbing so bad I couldn't see. I mean, I was just crying. So I just stopped because it was only going 35, and I stopped, and I was just kind of crossways in the middle of the road. And you wouldn't think any big thing about this except for Bob was with me, and Bob was there for a reason. I know he was there for a reason, and here's why. Right as that passed through me, my phone indicated there was a message. And I didn't know who it was from. I thought maybe it was Patty because it was 10 o'clock at night now, And so I picked up my phone and I couldn't see it. So I handed it to Bob and I said, "Here, read this." And he goes, "It's from Kimberly." And I said, "Kimberly, that's my counselor." And he goes, "Yeah, here's what it said."
Oh, wow.
And he read John 24:17 is what he read me. And the part that stuck with me, it said, "Do not be afraid." And so I went into that whole thing, and this was probably a week before he passed. And on February 28th, my dad's birthday, Josh passed at 5:30 in the evening.
Wow.
And I knew.
Yeah. Man, in hindsight, would you say it was helpful to have been shown that ahead of time?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
You knew it was from God.
I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
That's the only way it could be.
You think that was just part of his being with you through it?
Yeah, I think it would have been even more traumatic.
Yeah.
Had I not. He was in hospice for about 4 or 5 days.
Okay.
But he was doing really well. In fact, they kept telling us that he shouldn't even be there. But I'm glad we didn't leave.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So
thank you so much, both of you, for sharing the way you do.
Sorry, it's a long
Oh,
one.
I love
No,
it.
I'm
It's
glad you shared
it's
that.
so meaningful to just hear how God worked in your life, and even just for you to be able to share your grief here. That's we're honored that you would do that.
Thank you.
When can you think about times when, after the fact, when you just felt God's comfort?
Yes.
Can you describe one of those times?
Do you want to go first or you want me to?
You go first.
Okay. Well, this is another thing that happened that I have in my book that I've been writing
Okay.
down. I haven't finished it. I haven't been able to do the last few days because I just have not. It's been
Okay.
7 years and I still haven't been able to do it.
Wow.
That's how strong grief can be.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing was that not the night that he died, but the night after, I still couldn't sleep very well, and I was tossing and turning, and I was in a dream state, and I saw all of a sudden these bright flashing colors, just incredible color, just flashing. And then it got to this red, and it just kind of slowed down, and it became a red polo shirt with a head and arms. And all of a sudden, it was Josh.
Oh, wow.
And it was just as clear as can be in my dream. And all he said to me was, "Dad, I'm okay."
Wow.
Boom, he was gone.
Wow.
That is so cool.
So the other part of the story is, so his mother, we'd been divorced since he was 2.5 years old, told me at the funeral that Josh came to her.
Wow.
And I said, "Really?" And I didn't say anything that he had come to me. And I said to her, "Well, what did he say?" And she said, "Well, I couldn't really make him out, but I knew it was him. And he didn't really say anything, but he said it in my mind kind of thing. And he says, 'Mom, I'm okay.'"
Oh, my gosh.
Amazing.
He told her the same thing.
Wow.
Not kidding.
That's neat. Wow.
That is really neat.
It's almost hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, but I mean, I think in some ways this just shows us that God loves us enough to get the message to us that we can have some comfort. Okay, so you both have really felt like some healing in your journey, and I know one of the things I think you're helping us all to understand. And if I look back in my life, I've lost friends and family members, and I can recognize, there's times when you just kind of get transported back, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like this is something that's just going to go away. But what advice would you give to somebody who's on the front end of their grief journey? Any thoughts that you would share with them?
I think for me, making sure to reach out, I think is very important. That way you do have some support. And if you don't have that, then we'll tell you how to get involved with Grief Share. And give you some opportunity to get involved and build a community. So I think that's important. I also think it's important for them to know that whatever feelings that you are feeling are valid, whether that's guilt or anger at the person or at God, or just sadness. I mean, there's just so many different emotions and feelings that grief brings. And I think that I want them to know you are valid in whatever feelings you're feeling.
That's good.
I like in Grief Share because they say it's normal.
Yeah.
Anxiety is normal, and they talk about the different thoughts you may have and the anger that you have and proper ways to express it, which is really important. But it also ties it to the Bible, which I think is really good. So get into your Bible.
Yes.
And I think even, little things like just getting out of bed and taking a shower in the beginning and trying to try to get outside.
So good.
It's just so helpful.
Yeah, that's
excellent.
great. Yeah, little baby steps.
Baby steps.
Yeah. And be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Show yourself grace.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, yeah. So how would people...
Well, there's several different ways. There's our connection card, which is one. I like that.
Okay, Church on Sunday, we're going to be talking about it. Yeah.
All right, awesome. And then there's also, you can go to griefshare.org.
Yeah.
And you can find a Grief Share near you.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be through our church, but that's nice.
And we're in the Portland, Oregon area, so yeah.
And you don't have to belong to any church.
Yeah.
But know that it's a faith-centered and God-centered program.
Yeah.
And it really helps.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, and you can join at any point during the 13 weeks.
Okay, that was the question I had. So you can just jump in and you'll just cycle through the whole thing.
Right, anytime you want.
Fantastic.
And we'll do it again.
Exactly, and then we'll go through it again. So if you missed any, you'll get them on the next
round. Oh, that's
round.
fantastic.
So I do love that. It's always open for people. And then another way, if you are a Westsider or you happen to check out the app or the website, you can go to the group section and sign up. And we are under the growth group section.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And if you know someone who is grieving, come with them.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
Come with them. It's just a support. That. It really encourages them to hang out and get into it. And sometimes if it's early, it's kind of hard because I came the first time was only a few weeks after Josh died. So
needed a little support.
I did.
Yeah.
But Kimberly came with me. So
amazing.
She was a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And so if you know someone who's needing this, please bring them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you again so much, both of you, for sharing your life and your story. And, my prayer is that those that have been watching and listening can feel like somebody knows what they're going through and that there is hope, there is comfort, there is healing available. Right. So I want to invite all of you who've been with us and listening, thank you for hanging in here. And also want to invite you to jump into Easter at Westside. It's this coming weekend, and we are so excited about it. And you can find out more at westsidecommunitychurch.com/Easter. But we're going to be starting a series called Dragons and Dandelions, which will help with things like grief. And we're really pumped to get into it. So we hope to see you here soon. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Midweek Motivation. To make sure you don't miss any content in the future, please subscribe, share, and if you enjoyed this, give us a like. And consider popping by a Westside service some weekend. You can find out more at westsidecommunitychurch.com.